family, welcome to another video. In this one we're going to talk about step parents. Okay, are all step parents evil? I have had the privilege of enduring about 6 step parents, about 5 of them from my father's side and 1 from my mother's side. And I think that it is important to have this discussion because there are so many children that have to deal with this. Not just children, really, actually, teenagers and adults that have to deal with having step parents. And it's important to see it from a couple of different perspectives, if you ask me. So from the child's perspective, I can speak. And I can also speak from the perspective of the adults involved because I have friends who are step parents. And so I have seen it from both angles, and it's very interesting. So let's start from the child's perspective. Okay, from a child's perspective, the best thing is to have both their biological parents together, obviously, right? You don't want one parent to leave and then somebody else come and try to replace your parent that is gone, and that person try to act as your parent and tell you what to do. That is the absolute I don't even know what to call it. It's like the nerve of it kind of thing in a child's eyes, right? And there are different ages and different maturity levels of these children that I'm talking about. But in general, as soon as one parent is replaced by somebody else who is not the child's parent, the threat is imminent. It's a no-brainer, right? So in the child's eyes, most of the time from the child's perspective, that step parent that just came into the picture, they don't want you there. They don't want to have anything to do with you. You're not the one. You're not the one, right? And again, this is in general. So that from the get-go is a challenge for the child because of that mindset. The pain that the child had to go through dealing with the separation of the child's parents, right? That is enough, without having somebody else come and try to be your parent or try to replace the parent that you had before. And a lot of the step parents will say, I'm not trying to be your mother, I'm not trying to be your father, I'm not trying to replace, your parents. But you don't even have to say it because the fact that you're there in their place, in a way, you've replaced them. So it's not an intentional thing, maybe on the step parents, side or from their perspective, but from the child's perspective, that's exactly what you have done, and therefore you are the enemy. Sometimes from the child's perspective also, especially if there was an affair with you and they saw that happening where you were breaking up the marriage or you were a part of the marriage being broken up, I should say, you're a bad person. So why are you here? What do you want? Leave me alone. So right in that situation, it's really a no-win situation for the child and for the step parent, and it's very painful for all parties involved. Now, I think that's one thing that we lose when it comes to children that have to deal with step parents. It's a very, very painful place to be. I've been there many times, many times. Too many times for a child to have dealt with. I can say that. And the pain is that instead of it being about you, the child, where both adults are focused on what you're going through because you are a minor and are probably confused and hurt and need sometimes a little bit of extra attention. Instead of it being about you, they make it about them, right? And okay, so you, the child, now are being disrespectful. Why are you not listening to your stepmother or your stepfather? And then you become the bad person. And the emotions there are, I can't even express it. It's devastating, truly is, to a child. Especially when you're forced to call that step parent dad or mom, where, your biological parent is telling you must call them dad or mom. They're not, though. And that is one thing I have to emphasize on because I had to deal with that. And I was always the child that would conform. Whatever you need, just tell me what you need, I'll do it, and leave me alone. That was me, right? I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't be disrespectful. Just tell me what you need, let me do it, leave me the hell alone. That was my perspective as a child. I'll do it with a smile. I wouldn't, have an attitude about it. But the reason why I was like that is because I knew that once I do what I'm asked to do, I'll be left alone. So that's how I dealt with those kinds of situations. But I see a lot of strife in blended families, and it's devastating to me from the perspective of the child. For the adults, I'm sorry, you've grown. Okay, handle your business. Do what is necessary for the child. You're an adult. You should be able to take care of yourself. Your maturity level should be at a point where it's not about you anymore, that you're able to handle how you're feeling and control it and focus on the child, because the child is the one who is still, growing up, still figuring out life, still trying to decide who they are and trying to gain some level of self-esteem and self-worth. So it's all about the child. Adults, never forget it, ever. I've been through it and I'm telling you, it's a painful place to be for a child, okay, and very confusing. From my perspective, even though my parents had both moved on and had other relationships, I still daydreamed about them being together. So even though in reality it wasn't, to me it was still possible. So it was a very difficult thing for me to see day to day some other parent in place of mine. When it came to my father, he remarried many times over, one after the other. So I went through 5 stepmothers. In the beginning, they absolutely treated me fantastically because they knew I was the apple of my father's eye. They knew I was very special to my father. They knew that my father had a close bond with me where he treasured me. I was the third child between my mother and father, and the only girl. So the first 2 were boys, little rascals. And then there was me, the angel, right? So my father truly treasured me, and I felt it, I knew it. And so when these women would come, in the beginning, they would, try to get close to me and, try to please me and include me. But in my mind, you're not my mother. Get away from me. Leave me alone. What do you need? I'll do it for you. Leave me. Just tell me what you need. Let me do it and go. That's all. I don't want to sit around and chat with you. I want to have a conversation with you. You're not here for me. You're here for my father. Let's keep it straight. Okay? So again, I wasn't disrespectful or anything, but I did keep my distance because that's how I guarded my heart. The other thing was my father went for the young women, and a lot of them, I was a teenager for part of it, and a lot of them were no more than 5 to 8 years older than me. Like they could be my older siblings. Okay. And some of them were my brother's age. So I was like, no, we're not doing that. And eventually my father and them would, butt heads. I don't think it was ever over me. I think that my father was a very promiscuous person. Papa was a rolling stone. I'll tell you that. For every wife he would have at least a girlfriend or 2 on the side. It was just normal to him. It wasn't a big deal. Why have a problem? Just a girlfriend, And these women who at one point had been the side chicks, for some reason didn't understand why it would happen to them. And I'm like, are you dumb? Are you dumb? The writing was on the wall. What's wrong with you? So when they came in, there was that distrust already, or mistrust, whatever you want to call it. And eventually I think that was what would, break them apart. And my father, of course, very quickly, that roaming eye, always looking for the next best looking, young woman. And his women were always very beautiful. The women that he picked were gorgeous looking. And so one, marriage after another. Now on my mother's side, my mother was not I don't even know how she and my father were attracted to each other. One was definitely a playboy. The other one was like a nun. Like very pious, very well groomed, very ladylike, very poised. So I still don't understand the attraction. But anyway, they were married at one point and I was a product. And so basically my mother stayed unmarried for a long time. I did get to meet some of her boyfriends, fantastic men. And eventually when she remarried, of course I met my stepfather, one of the gentlest, humblest, kindest human beings I've ever known. And so he was a stepfather. But still, within me, I was hoping my mother and my father would get together. So from the beginning, I'm like, what are you doing here? What do you want? Why are you here? Okay, you're filling a spot that's not yours. So all that was, of course, in my mind as a teenager. And one of the things that I had to get over, I had to really work to get over, was that my parents had moved on. Okay, and it wasn't about me. In their eyes, it definitely wasn't about me. It was about them. No one was considering how I felt. In my mind, no one was considering how I felt or how I would feel having a step parent. So from my mother's side, when she moved on, that was the final, I don't want to say blow, but that was the final thing that happened that made me realize, no, they're not getting back together. It's over, it's done. My father had, gone through several women back and back, so I'm like, yeah, there's a chance, because once this woman leaves, there's a chance, it could be my mother again, and then another woman will leave, it could be my mother again. So it almost looked as if he was looking for somebody who would probably fit my mother's profile. Physically, they had features that looked like my mother, their face, the shape of their face, and stuff like that. But that was where it ended, and their beauty. That's where it ended. But so in my mind, him keeping up, trying to look for somebody in my mind that looked like my mother. One day he would probably end up with my mother again. So that was in my mind. And then my mother goes and marries somebody else. I'm like, okay, that dream just exploded, gone, done. From living with my stepfather, and accepting that the deal was done, that my mother and father would never get back together, that was devastating to me. My stepfather, as kind and gentle and humble as he was not my father. He just wasn't. And it took a while for me to accept him. I absolutely respected him. He was a wonderful gentleman, but it took a while for me to accept him. And what made it even worse, when I had to live with them for a few years with my mother and my stepdad, was that my mother told me one day, because I used to call him Uncle Kofi, and my mother's like, you will not call him that. He is your father. You will call him Dad. That broke me. That truly did, because in my mind, it was my choice. And I was 12 at that time. It should have been my choice. From the time that she said that, it was difficult for it to come out of my mouth. So as much as I could, I avoided calling him that. So even when I was referring to him, I had to find a way not to say Dad. And I don't think my mother ever knew it, because again, I was that respectful child, and I would have a smile on my face with whatever it is you tell me. You can insult me and I had a smile on my face. But inside, I was broken, because nobody could replace my father. Nobody. As much of a Rolling Stone as he was my father. Okay. So and I called my father Daddy, when, we were having conversations, he was Daddy. So having to call somebody else that was almost like I was betraying my biological father, right? It was the same with my mother. I never called any of my father's wives mother, ever. Because to me, I would be betraying my biological mother. No, I'm not doing that. You're not my mother. So anyway, in the beginning I was resentful of it. I definitely was. And I was resentful of him because he was the recipient of something that I felt should have been my choice to make. And he was benefiting from me giving him that level of emotional attachment, calling him daddy. It wasn't his call. It shouldn't have been my mother's call. It should have been mine. So that being said, eventually as I lived longer and longer, with my mother and my stepdad, calling him daddy became a privilege. It became an absolute privilege. I felt honored that he had stepped into that role where he cared so much about me, who wasn't his child. Even when my biological father could be a dick, when it came to, corresponding with my stepdad and trying to do the best thing for me. And my stepdad never said one bad thing about my father, ever. He was such a gentleman. And it took a long time for me to actually realize that they were actually having conversations about me and what was best for me and my brothers, and that my stepdad was trying so hard to put myself and my brothers in the best environment, the best situation, so that we could develop and have a better future. I found all of that out later, and it made me love my stepdad even more. And so, looking from a child's perspective, I needed that time to ascertain for myself how I felt about my stepdad and when I was comfortable to call him dad. Because if he had turned out to be a beast, okay, I'm just saying, and I had been forced to call him dad, the emotional turmoil would have been even more. It would have been even worse. So for all step parents out there and the actual biological parents of your children, you have to have a conversation before the stepmother or father comes in. Please, no matter how young your child is, they have emotions that have to be addressed, because from the onset it's a difficult situation. None of those situations are easy. It's difficult and it's complicated. So I need you to have a conversation with the children, you, the biological parent, with your children, before the stepmother or father comes in. Then you have a conversation with your partner that's going to come and replace the children's, mother or father. And I don't even want to say replace or stand in the place or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? And you all come to an understanding on how things are going to go. When it comes to who directs the children to do something, let it always come from the biological parents. Because especially when the child is a teenager, the step parent is wrong. No. I may be walking, toward a cliff, and the step parent may say, be careful, you're walking toward a cliff. In my mind, shut up and sit down. You're not my father, you're not my mother. You know what I mean? In my mind as a child. But a lot of times they're coming from a good place, they're coming from a caring place, because they love your father or your mother so much. They're in their mind taking you on as their children as well, for the good step parents. So they feel free to let you know when you're going the wrong direction, or if you're not doing something right. They feel free to let you know that, listen, let's fix this. This is not a good direction that you're going, whatnot. But from the perspective of the child, almost always, not in every case, but almost always, you're the evil step parent. Okay, you took the place of their real parents. So you have to be very careful how you navigate that. You have to gain the trust and affection of the child. It shouldn't be afforded to you just because your father or their mother is now in a relationship with you. No, I'm sorry, you earn it. You work and you earn it, okay? As a step parent. For that reason, I will never ever be a step parent. Praise the Lord Jesus, I'm claiming it, okay? I have seen so many good step parents getting burned and treated terribly just because they are not the biological parent, and it is painful. Both for everyone involved. I've said that for everyone involved, it's painful. So I just wanted to share that if you have children and you have a blended marriage, it's not easy. It will never be easy. Even when the marriage is not a blended one and it's the original whatever, it's still hard, okay? 22 years. Let me just tell you, it's still difficult. So when it's a blended situation, it is delicate. Emotions are very sensitive, a little more sensitive than if it wasn't a blended family. And you have to be very careful, almost like walk on eggshells, almost. Really, until trust is gained, boundaries are defined, and emotions settle down some, and then you guys can sort of, keep having those conversations and place yourself. So that's all I have to say about that. Just know that you're not alone. Whether you're the child or whether you're the step parent or whether you're the original biological parent, it's not easy, and especially when the kids have to go from one household to another. Oh my Lord, I dealt with that too. I was it. Today you're with your father, tomorrow with your mother. And the different rules in each household, it's not fair to the child. I'll tell you that. It's just so unfair. But it is life, and you have to deal with it. In this country, in America, you guys will probably talk about therapy and everything. Where I come from, therapy is for sissies. You just toughen it up and you deal with it. Okay, I don't know if they're doing that now, but I had never even heard of something called therapy when it came to those kinds of situations. That would probably have helped me. No, so when I said therapy is for sissies, truly I'm joking, but I think it's important really to address the child's needs first. You parents, you adults, sit down, take care of the child's needs first, okay? And just remember that they're still growing up and they need care and feeding emotionally, physically, and mentally so that they're in a stable place. Okay? So that's all I have to say about that. That's where I'm coming from. Let me know if you have been in a blended family, if you're if you're a parent or if you've been a child in that situation and are even an adult dealing with a blended family now. It can't be easy, and I like to hear from different perspectives. These are the perspectives that I've seen and dealt with. I want to know if you have similar experiences or if you have a different perspective for this situation. So thank you all for tuning in and for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you again in the very next video.